You knew about him all along, didn't you?
That's a strong accusation, dear, and quite misplaced.
Please, let's calm down. This isn't helping anyone.
Say it again, so everyone can hear you. Vanessa said, her voice calm but sharp enough to slice straight through the dinner table conversation. And in that moment, Chloe Bennet felt every pair of eyes turn toward her, like she had already been found guilty of something she did not even understand. Yet the room fell into a silence, so sudden it felt staged, as if this had been building. Long before she ever walked in, Chloe blinked slowly, her fork still in her hand, hovering over a plate she had barely touched. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said carefully, but Vanessa let out a quiet breath, like she had expected that answer. "You know exactly what I am talking about," she replied, and then glanced toward Derek Collins, who sat stiffly beside her, avoiding Chloe's gaze, completely, which made Chloe's stomach tighten because confusion began to shift into something colder, something more dangerous. Michael Bennet leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable, but his silence louder than anything else in the room. "Vanessa," he finally said, but there was hesitation in his voice, not defense, not certainty, just uncertainty, and that hurt more than Chloe expected. "No." Vanessa continued gently, but firmly, placing her napkin down, like she was about to present something reasonable, something undeniable. "I think it is time we stop pretending that Chloe's behavior has not been inappropriate." The word inappropriate landed heavy, twisting the air into something suffocating. Chloe felt heat rush to her face, not from guilt, but from disbelief. "What behavior?" she asked, her voice steady, only because she forced it to be. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, studying her like she was already disappointed. "The way you have been around Derek, the looks, the comments, the way you linger when you think no one notices." Chloe's heart started pounding because nothing Vanessa said matched reality yet. The way she said it made it sound detailed, specific, almost rehearsed. Chloe turned toward her father, waiting for him to shut this down, to laugh it off, to say this was ridiculous, but he did not. He just watched her like he was trying to figure out which version of her to believe, and that was the moment something inside Chloe shifted. Not fear, not even anger, but clarity, because this was not a misunderstanding. This was an accusation designed to stick, and as the silence stretched and no one came to her defense, Chloe slowly placed her fork down, looked directly at Vanessa, and realized that whatever game her stepmother was playing had already begun long before tonight, and she had just been pulled into it without warning. The silence did not break. When dinner ended, it stretched into the hallway, into the kitchen, into every quiet movement that followed, like something invisible had settled over the house. Chloe stood at the sink, rinsing her plate, even though she had barely eaten, her hands steady, only because she focused on the sound of running water behind her. She could feel it, the shift in how the house held her, like it no longer recognized her as part of it. Footsteps approached, slowly, measured, and she knew without turning that it was her father. "Chloe." Michael said, his voice low, cautious, like he was stepping into unfamiliar territory. She turned off the faucet and faced him, waiting for something clear, something solid, but all she saw was hesitation. "You want to explain what Vanessa meant?" asked, and the question alone felt like confirmation that he was already halfway convinced. "There is nothing to explain," Chloe said, her voice calm but firm. "Because it is not real." Michael exhaled and rubbed his temple, like this was exhausting for him, like he was the one caught in the middle. She would not say something like that without a reason, he replied, and that sentence hit harder than anything Vanessa had said at the table. Chloe stared at him, disbelief creeping in. "So you think I gave her one?" she asked quietly, but he did not answer right away, and that silence told her everything. Derek's voice echoed faintly from the living room, talking to Vanessa, low enough that the words blurred together. But the tone carried something uneasy, something guarded. Chloe glanced toward the doorway, and for a brief second, she caught Derek looking in her direction before quickly looking away again, and that small moment made something click, Not clearly, not fully, but enough to feel wrong deeply. Wrong, Chloe turned back to her father. If you believe her, then... Nothing I say matters tonight, she said, and stepped past him before he could respond, her chest tight, but her mind is sharper than it had been all evening, because now it was no longer about defending herself. It was about understanding why this accusation existed at all. And as she reached the stairs, she heard Vanessa's soft laugh from the living room, light controlled, almost satisfied. And Chloe realized this was not just a misunderstanding, this was positioning, and she had just been moved into a role she never agreed to play. By the next morning, the story no longer belonged to Chloe. It had already moved beyond the walls of the house, slipping quietly into conversations she was not part of, and reaching people who had no reason to question it. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand before she even got out of bed, a message from her aunt asking if she was doing okay, another from a cousin that felt less concerned and more curious, and then one that made her chest tighten. Someone she barely spoke to wrote that they hoped she would learn from her mistakes. Chloe sat up slowly, staring at the screen, as a cold realization settled in. Vanessa had not just accused her, she had already shared it with others, shaping the narrative before Chloe even had the chance to process it herself. She set the phone down and took a breath, steadying herself, because reacting emotionally now would only confirm the version of her they were already building downstairs. She could hear movement, soft voices, and the faint clink of dishes, like everything was normal, like nothing had shifted except her place in it. Chloe walked down the stairs and paused just before entering the kitchen, watching for a moment as Vanessa stood by the counter pouring coffee. Her posture relaxed, her expression composed, while Michael sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, his face still carrying that same uncertainty from the night before. Derek was there too, leaning against the doorway, his presence quieter than usual, almost careful, and when Chloe stepped into the room, the conversation stopped. Not abruptly, but enough for her to notice. Vanessa turned, first offering a small, controlled smile. "Good morning," she said, like nothing had happened, and that almost felt worse than the accusation itself. Chloe nodded slightly and moved toward the cabinet, reaching for a glass, aware of the way the room felt different around her, like she had crossed an invisible line she could not uncross. Michael looked up finally. "We should talk later," he said, but his tone suggested delay, not resolution, and Chloe understood that whatever was coming would not be simple. Vanessa took a slow sip of her coffee, her eyes briefly meeting Chloe's with something unreadable beneath the surface. And in that moment, Chloe knew this was no longer about one accusation. It was about control of the entire story, and right now she was the only one who had not been given a voice in it. Chloe did not wait for the conversation her father promised, because something about the way everything had unfolded told her that whatever explanation came later would already be shaped by Vanessa's version of events. Instead, she spent the next hour going over every detail of the night before, replaying it carefully, not emotionally but logically, like she was trying to solve something that did not quite add up. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the same moment in her mind, the one Vanessa described so confidently, the so-called looks, the lingering, the comments, and the more Chloe thought about it, the more something felt off, not just exaggerated but constructed, because there had been no private moment, no situation where she and Derek were alone long enough for anything to even be misinterpreted. Every interaction had been ordinary, brief, and always within sight of others, which made Vanessa's certainty feel less like assumption and more like intention. Chloe stood up slowly and walked toward her door, pausing as she heard voices again from downstairs. Softer, now more controlled, she moved quietly down the hallway, stopping just before the stairs, where the sound carried more clearly. "We just have to be careful how we handle this," Michael was saying, his tone tense, like he was trying to manage something already out of his control. Vanessa responded gently, almost reassuring. "I know, but ignoring it would be worse. She needs boundaries before this gets out of hand." Chloe felt her stomach drop slightly at the phrasing before this. gets out of hand as if something had already happened, as if she was already a problem that needed to be contained. Derek spoke next, his voice lower, uncertain. I do not think she meant anything by it. And that was the first time he had said anything close to defense. But even that was weak, incomplete, and quickly overshadowed by Vanessa's quiet response. Intent does not matter perception. Does Chloe stepped back slowly, her mind racing, because that sentence did not belong in a simple misunderstanding. It belonged in something planned, something strategic. She returned to her room and closed the door gently, her thoughts aligning with a new clarity. This was not about what she did or did not do. It was about how she was being positioned and, more importantly, why. And as she sat down again, her eyes drifted toward her phone, still resting on the nightstand, filled with messages from people who had already decided who she was. Chloe picked it up and scrolled slowly, her expression hardening not with panic, but with resolve, because if Vanessa was controlling the narrative, then Chloe needed to find the truth hidden beneath it, and she had a feeling it started with the one person in the house who was clearly holding something back. Chloe did not confront Derek immediately because instinct told her that pushing too hard would only make him retreat further. Instead, she waited, watching, listening, measuring the small shifts in his behavior that others seemed to ignore, but could not quite hide the way he avoided being alone in the same room with her. Now, the way his responses were shorter, more careful, as if every word had to pass through an internal filter before being spoken. Late that afternoon, she found her moment. The house was quieter. Vanessa had stepped out to run errands, and her father was upstairs on a work call, leaving Derek alone in the kitchen, staring down at his phone like he was reading something he did not want to deal with. Chloe walked in slowly, not making a sound until she was close enough that he noticed her presence, and looked up quickly, his expression tightening for just a second before he forced it neutral. "Hey," he said, but the word lacked ease. Chloe crossed her arms lightly, not defensive, but grounded. "We need to talk," she said, and there was no hesitation in her tone. This time, Derek exhaled softly and glanced toward the hallway like he expected someone else to appear before nodding. "Okay," Chloe held his gaze steady. "You know what she said is not true," she said, and it was not a question. Derek shifted his weight, slightly running a hand along the back of his neck, a gesture that felt more like discomfort than guilt. "I told her I did not think you meant anything by it," he replied carefully, choosing words that stayed in the middle, never fully committing to either side. Chloe narrowed her eyes slightly. "That is not the same thing as saying it did not happen," she said, and the distinction hung clearly between them. Derek looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening before he spoke again, quieter this time. "Things can look a certain way, even if that is not what you intended." Chloe felt a flicker of frustration, but kept her voice controlled. There was no moment for anything to even look like that, she said, and stepped a little closer. "So why does she sound so certain?" Derek hesitated, and that hesitation was louder than any answer he could have given. Chloe watched him closely as something shifted behind his eyes, not confusion, not surprise, but recognition, like he understood more than he was willing to say. "You should just keep your distance for a while," he finally said, and that was when everything became clear. Not the full truth, but enough to know that he was not just unsure, he was protecting something. Or someone. Chloe straightened slowly, her expression cooling as she stepped back, because now she understood this was not about a misunderstanding between three people. This was about a narrative being maintained, and Derek was choosing to stay inside it. And as she turned to leave, she realized that whatever Vanessa had started, Derek was helping keep it in place, whether out of fear, loyalty, or something else entirely. And that meant the truth was going to be harder to uncover than she first thought, but also far more important That night, Chloe did not try to sleep right away because every piece of the day kept rearranging itself in her mind, forming a pattern she could no longer ignore. Vanessa's certainty, Derek's hesitation, her father's silence. None of it pointed to confusion, it pointed to intention, and the more Chloe thought about it, the more one question refused to let go. What did Vanessa gain from this? She sat at her desk, staring at the framed photo of her and her father from years ago before Vanessa entered their lives, before everything became layered and complicated and strategic. And then slowly, something clicked, not emotionally, but logically. Vanessa had not just attacked Chloe's reputation, she had shifted her position inside the family from daughter to problem, from equal to liability. And once someone was seen that way, it became easier to justify decisions about them, decisions that would have seemed harsh or unreasonable before Chloe stood up, suddenly her heart picking up pace as she moved toward the door, because there was one place in the house that held answers, not obvious ones, but enough to confirm a direction. Her father's home office. She hesitated. Only briefly before stepping inside. The room was neat, as always organized in a way that reflected control and routine, but on the desk there were documents stacked in careful piles, some open, some marked with small tabs. Chloe approached slowly, her eyes scanning without touching at first, until a familiar word caught her attention. Property agreement. She reached out and lifted the top page carefully, reading just enough to understand the context, names, numbers, dates, and then a line that made her breath still. Transfer of ownership contingent on residency status. Chloe frowned, slightly reading it again more carefully because the wording felt specific, deliberate, and suddenly Vanessa's accusation took on a different weight. If Chloe's presence in the house became unstable, if she chose to leave or was pushed out, certain conditions might shift, certain advantages might activate. Chloe set the paper down slowly, her mind racing, now connecting pieces that had felt separate only hours ago. This was not about jealousy, this was about positioning and leverage, and as she stepped back from the desk, she realized something that made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with clarity. Vanessa was not reacting to a situation, she was creating one, and Chloe had just discovered the first real reason why. Chloe closed the office door quietly behind her, her mind moving faster than her breathing. Now, as everything began to align into something undeniable, the accusation, the timing, the shift in how she was being treated, it was not random, it was strategic, and more importantly, it was already in motion. She stepped back into the hallway just as she heard the front door open downstairs, followed by Vanessa's voice, light and controlled as always, carrying through the house with effortless confidence. Chloe did not go down right away. Instead, she paused at the top of the stairs. Listening carefully, I picked up the documents we talked about, Vanessa said, and there was a slight emphasis on the word documents that made Chloe's attention sharpen instantly. Michael responded with a tired exhale. We can look at them later. I do not want to deal with more right now, but Vanessa's tone remained steady, persuasive without sounding forceful. It is better to handle things while everything is still fresh before decisions get complicated. Chloe's fingers curled slightly against the railing because that sentence confirmed what she had just started to uncover. This was about decisions and timing and control, not about feelings, not about boundaries, and certainly not about any misunderstanding. Involving her, Chloe moved down a few steps slowly, just enough to see into the living room without being fully visible. Vanessa was standing near the coffee table, placing a folder down carefully, while Derek sat nearby, his posture tense, his attention fixed on the floor, like he already knew what was inside and did not want to engage with it. If Chloe decides to move out on her own, it simplifies everything. Vanessa continued, her voice soft, almost reasonable, but the words landed with precise intention. Michael hesitated again. "She is not moving out," he said, but there was uncertainty in it, not conviction. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "She might, if she feels uncomfortable here after everything that has come up." And there it was, the full shape of the plan revealed, not directly but clearly enough. Chloe stepped fully into the room. Now, no longer hiding her presence. "Nothing has come up," she said evenly, and all three of them turned toward her. Vanessa's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened slightly as if recalculating in real time. Derek looked away immediately, and Michael straightened in his seat, caught between both sides. Chloe walked closer, her gaze steady, her voice calm but firm. "You are not going to push me out of my own home with something you made up," she said, and for the first time since the accusation, Vanessa did not respond right away. She simply watched Chloe like she was seeing her differently. Now, not as someone easy to control, but as someone who had started to understand the game. And that silence told Chloe something even more important than words ever could. She was getting close to the truth, and Vanessa knew it. Vanessa recovered quickly, her expression softening into something almost sympathetic, as if Chloe's accusation had only confirmed her concerns rather than challenged them. "Chloe, I think you are overwhelmed right now," she said gently, but there was a subtle firmness underneath that made it clear she was not backing down. "No." Chloe replied immediately, her voice steady, her posture unmoving. "I think you expected me to stay quiet." The air in the room shifted instantly. Michael looked between them, his confusion deepening as the tension became impossible to ignore. While Derek remained still, his silence now more noticeable than ever. Chloe stepped closer to the coffee table, her eyes dropping briefly to the folder Vanessa had placed there before, looking back up. "You said, if I left, it would simplify things," she continued. "So, let us be honest. This was never about me or Derek. It was about getting me out of the house." Vanessa's lips pressed together for a fraction of a second before she exhaled softly. "You are connecting things that are not related," she replied, but her tone had changed, slightly less certain, more controlled. Chloe did not look away. "Then explain the property agreement in Dad's office," she said, and that was the moment everything cracked just slightly. Michael's head turned sharply toward Vanessa. "What agreement?" he asked, and for the first time since this started, there was clear concern in his voice. Vanessa hesitated. Just long enough for Chloe to see it before answering. "It is just paperwork we discussed. Nothing finalized yet," but Chloe shook her head slowly. "It is about residency conditions if I leave, the ownership shifts differently," she said calmly, laying the truth out in the open. Derek shifted in his seat, now visibly uncomfortable, while Michael stood up slowly, his expression tightening as pieces began to fall into place. "Is that true?" he asked Vanessa this time, uncertain but direct. Vanessa met his gaze, holding it for a moment before responding carefully. "It is more complicated than that, but the control she had carried so effortlessly before was slipping." Chloe could feel it, the balance shifting in real time. The narrative she had been trapped in beginning to unravel, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough for doubt to enter the room, and once doubt existed, control was no longer absolute. Chloe took a small step back, her voice quieter now, but sharper than ever. "You needed a reason to make me leave, and you created one," she said. And this time, Vanessa did not immediately deny it. She simply stood there watching Chloe with a new expression, something colder, more calculating, as if she was already thinking about her next move. And Chloe realized this was not the end of it, this was just the moment where everything stopped being hidden. Michael did not sit back down. The weight of what had just surfaced kept him standing there between them, like he was seeing his own home differently for the first time. "Vanessa, I need you to be clear with me," He said, his voice steadier now than it had been all day, and that shift alone was enough for Chloe to know. Something had changed. The doubt that had once been directed at her was no longer one-sided. Vanessa held his gaze for a moment, then glanced briefly at the folder on the table before looking back. At him. I was trying to protect our future, she said, carefully choosing each word. There were options we needed to consider, and Chloe's situation complicated things. Chloe almost let out a small breath at that, not because she was surprised, but because Vanessa had finally said it. Out loud, not the accusation, not the story, but the intention behind it. Michael frowned slightly. By accusing her of something that is not even proven, he asked, and now there was something else in his tone. Disappointment. Vanessa's expression tightened just slightly. Did not invent concern out of nothing, she replied, but the confidence was thinner, now less convincing. Chloe watched both of them quietly, no longer needing to interrupt, because the truth was beginning to unfold on its own. Derek shifted again, finally speaking after being silent. For too long, Vanessa, you told me it would just make things easier if she decided to leave on her own, he said, his voice low but clear enough to land exactly where it needed to, and that was it, the final piece. Michael turned sharply toward Vanessa, his expression hardening in a way Chloe had not seen before. You said that, he asked, and this time, there was no hesitation in him. Vanessa opened her mouth as if to respond, but stopped just long enough for the silence to answer for her. Chloe felt something inside her settle. Not victory, not relief, but balance. Returning to a situation that had been tilted against her from the start, she stepped back slightly, giving space to the moment because she no longer needed to fight for her position. It was already shifting. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his voice quieter now, but firm. We are not making decisions based on something like this, he said, and Chloe knew that sentence was not just about the house, it was about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Vanessa looked at Chloe, then not with softness, not with control, but with something colder, something unresolved. Like this was not the outcome she had planned, but not the end of what she was willing to do. And as the room fell into a tense silence, Chloe realized that while the truth had surfaced, the situation itself had not fully settled, because just as she turned slightly, her phone buzzed again in her hand, and when she glanced down at the screen, her breath caught for the briefest moment. A message from an unknown number read simply, "I know what Vanessa told you, but that is not even the full story about Derek."